Joined now by the president of hockey operations for the Vancouver Canucks, Mr. Jim Rutherford. Jim, thanks for doing this. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
How are you climatizing yourself here to Vancouver and BC?
Well, pretty good. I mean, I haven't really got out and to see the city. I've been here many times before for many years, but it's been a lot of work in the last couple of months, and it's basically walk a few blocks to where I sleep and a few blocks to the office, and that's about as much as I've been doing.
We heard you always wanted to manage a Canadian team. What are the early observations about managing in a Canadian market?
Well, I was born in Canada. I love Canada. Um, I mean, I love living in the U.S. also. I mean, I have a home there, and possibly make my home there at some point in time. But Canada's a special place to me. I don't need to explain to anybody what hockey means to everybody here, and certainly being in a market like Vancouver, and the province of British Columbia with the passion that everybody has for the game, it's special. So I don't have a whole lot of observation at this point. I really just see the passion from the fans during the game, and I haven't had the time, and uh, lots of times don't take the time to really understand what everybody's saying out in the public. But I'm happy to be here in Vancouver and take on this challenge.
And there is a challenge for sure. There's been sort of two phases to this change in the Vancouver Canucks, starting with Bruce Boudreau coming in. And of course, we saw the team go on a heck of a tear the minute he got behind the bench. But things have quieted down in the new year. And since New Year's Day, more of a 500 team. Which do you think the Vancouver Canucks truly are? The team that went 8-0-1 off the bat there with Bruce, or the team that we've seen since New Year's?
Somewhere in between there. Uh, it's pretty hard to maintain the pace that the team had at the start, and then after that, there were circumstances around being a 500 team. We got key guys out of the lineup with COVID, and some of the top contending teams can do that. They have more depth and they can get away with it. We don't have as much depth, and it affected us. But with that being said, I give our players credit. I mean, they've come to the games, they've given all they've had, and kind of scratched and clawed their way back into the playoff race.
Have you talked to them about that? Do you go down to the room much at all? Have you spoken to them much since the opening week, say, when you took over?
No, I don't talk to the players a whole lot. That's the coach's job. Patrick Alvine now on board as the GM. He will probably communicate with them more than I do. I stay on top of things, what everybody's thinking, what everybody needs, and whatnot. But as for me communicating directly with them, not a whole lot. The guys that got COVID, I call them and see how they're doing, see if they need anything. When I first came here, I talked to the captains. I thought that was important to get some feedback from them. That was not in person; that was by phone, and that's really about it.
I mean, you can't get swayed by the players' belief that they are still in the playoff race. You've got to make the best decision for the team at large. But how much do you have to sort of take a measure of whether or not that plays into the actual ability to make the playoffs in a given year?
Well, the players' voices are heard by their actions, and based on what they've done to get back in the race, I think it's important that we try to let them continue down that road, and not just all of a sudden trade 3 or 4 key players and take them out of it. Now, with that being said, we got work to do here, and some things have to change, and we have to get more depth. We have to get more younger players. We have to get better control over the cap, as far as having some cushion there with the cap to be able do some things that might be good, that might come along for cap strap teams. And so we have to be aware of all those things. But like I said, I don't think that Bruce or Patrick or myself or anybody in hockey ops thinks it's fair to the players at this point in time to just start to dismantle this team.
What's the threshold there then, Jim? Like how far out from the deadline, how many points behind or teams to jump would you have to reach to come to the conclusion you're not in this anymore and it's time to start playing for next year?
Yeah, that's hard to say. I mean, the math kind of takes care of itself. There's not a lot of margin for error with the parity in the league and the number of teams that we have to catch and compete with. So certainly, if unfortunately if we went through a dry spell, um, the picture would be a lot more clear. But even with that, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to start to dismantle. Because the forward group is a fairly young group. We have the younger goalie, and so we're going to be a little bit careful as to how we make those decisions.
The big question, of course, Jim, is 52 years of NHL hockey in this market and no Stanley Cups. How long do you think it will take before this team can be cup competitive?
That's always hard to say. You're trying to add younger players that can come together within the next few years. You have to develop those players properly. The deals you have to make have to be for the right reasons. And then eventually it comes together. Now, the advantage that the Canucks have is we have a franchise goalie. And when you have that position covered, that can carry you a long ways. And you can go through different years of what's happened in this league. I'll take for example, because I'm familiar with it, the year that Nashville looked like they were going to miss the playoffs. I think it was in 16 that they played the Penguins in the finals, and they got in, and then it came together, and they had a chance to win the cup. They were right there in the finals. And with the parity in this league, it's hard to get in the playoffs, but when you get in the playoffs and your team comes together at the right time and you have the goalie that we have, it could happen sooner than later. But we have work to do. I mean, we don't have enough balance and enough depth through our lineup to be comfortable with the kind of team that we'd like to have going forward.
How many skaters away then? Yeah, we all agree the goaltender is in place. How many skaters away do you think you are, Jim?
Yeah, that's always hard to tell. I mean, even the ones you have, if they have to be going at 100%, and sometimes you have certain players that you're relying on maybe having an off year. So you don't really know. I mean, I don't know. You couldn't put a number on that. The thing that I'll say about, if you're talking about skaters, is the kind of teams that we like to have is 4 lines where the coach can roll every line, not be concerned what line they're going to play against. You get your 4th line against the other team's best, and they can handle it. So that's what we will work towards to get the balance throughout our lineup.
I have to say, from our perch, Jim, I would think the one thing that the fan base seems particularly sensitive to is long-term deals for players that are in their 30s. This franchise has been burned by those kinds of contracts before. I mean, every situation is a little bit different, so I understand maybe you don't have a blanket rule, but overall, do you have a feeling on signing 30-plus players to longer-term deals?
Well, when you sign that player, you're usually, what you're weighing is how many good years are you going to get out of that long-term deal, and then you're weighing, if you don't sign the player, obviously you don't have them. So, and if you sign the player, you're gonna weigh that. You're gonna get 3. You're gonna get 4 good years out of the 6 years. In the odd case, you get 6 years out of it, but it can be risky. You don't want to have too many of those, but you may want to have one or two. And I I agree with the fans. It's it's a tough decision when you get to that, but at the same time, like I said, you go through those guys and you don't sign them, then you don't have a good player, and it's hard to fill that spot.
Those are big decisions, obviously, and your resume, and this is with all due respect to the very impressive looking staff that you've assembled so far. But I mean, you're the guy with the resume. You're the guy that's been there and done that. When it comes to those final critical decisions, are you still going to be the one that's making those final decisions at the end of the day, at least for the duration of this season? I understand you want to give the reins to people like Patrick Allvin and the AGMs underneath him, but with these critical first measures, is it you that's ultimately going to be making that final decision, or will it be Mr. Allvin?
No, everybody's going to be able to do their job, and if we're getting to a point in making a critical decision, I'll certainly be part of that, and I'll weigh in on it and caution everybody, what the downfall is to that. And of course, when organizations are signing players, they're usually looking at what the upside is, but there's always a downside. So I won't weigh in on all the decisions. I want these people to be able to do their job. I'm here to help when they want to help. Um, we have a good group that, to this point, are very good communicators. Everybody's working together. Everybody wants to help everybody. But the way I like to do things is hire the appropriate people and let them do their jobs.
You've mentioned cap space, cap control, cap cushion many a time here, Jim. How much cap space are you hoping to create for next year?
As much as we can.
I think, how do you propose to do so?
I think when you're working in a flat cap world, there's going to be some really good deals come your way if you have the cap space. And the more cap space you have, the better chance you have. So we're going to want to create some cap space. It will never be as much as we want it to be, but certainly create enough that we're in a position that if the right deal comes along, the right free agent comes along, again, we're back to one of your earlier questions. It's usually a guy that's 20, 28, 29, or 30. Have to make a tough decision on that. But we want to be in a position to do those things in the off season. So we will work towards that. Have to make some tough decisions, maybe unpopular ones at times, but I feel that's where we have to go to be able to get younger players and build up that depth and bring this together in the next few years.
Yeah, and I was going to ask the follow-up, Jim, is how do you we hear so much about dollar in, dollar out. How do you propose to do that? Like, are you willing to take on some bad money this year if it opens up some cap space going forward?
Probably not. That's not the kind of deal we'd like to make. No.
More of the dollars out makes a lot of sense. I mean, you seem particularly cap aware. Do you think you're more? I mean, not for you to pat your own back here around the rest of the league, but do you think that you've got a handle on the cap that maybe some other guys around the league don't?
Oh no. I think I have a handle on the cap, but I think people have a handle on it around the league. It just gets so tricky, with players on LTI and just a lot of things you have to deal with, and that was part of bringing Emily on board. She's familiar with working on the player side and on the union side, doing contracts and whatnot, and she's been doing some good work and preparing what we've got here with the cap, where we can go with certain situations, and how it's going to play out here over the next 2 or 3 years. So we have the right people in place to understand what we've got and where we're going.
Well, you brought up Emily's name. Just your early impressions on Emily and Cammie, who made a lot of headlines, of course, with some historic moves there.
Very, very impressed. They want to be a part of it. They want to win. They work hard, and they're learning. But like I tell them, I try to learn something on a regular basis. If you don't, the game passes you by. You're learning all the time, and they're willing to learn. They're willing to work with other people, and I'm really impressed with them.
Jim, we understand you're in the midst of delegating responsibilities and all of that. Help us out on this one, because it was an issue with the previous regime here. Who makes the decisions on draft picks?
Well, we have a different structure now because we have Todd Harvey, that's the head of amateur scouting, and he has his scouts that send in reports. They prioritize the list for the draft. But now Todd Harvey is going to report to Cami Granato, who reports to Patrick Oveen, and Patrick Oveen is a former scout. He will get out in the field and see some of these picks. Derek Clancy, that came from Pittsburgh with me, he's another guy that will get out in the field and see some of these players as we start to identify, have our list prepared, and identify more for where we may fall in the draft. So I think we have a lot of good checkpoints right now as far as the amateur draft goes. Patrick Oveen can make the final decision. He's the general manager, but he works like I do. He lets other people do their job, but he's going to be asking a lot of questions before we make that pick.
Some news and notes for you. Jack Rathbone, maybe the top guy in your organization that isn't in your lineup right now, and he just got injured down at the AHL level. Was he on his way up fairly soon with the way he's been trending, or do you want to see what this professional or this NHL group does before you test him at the NHL level again?
No, we talk on a regular basis about bringing him up and see how he's doing here. He he was injured, and then he came back, and then his game was going good, and then he got injured the other night. So at some point in time here down the stretch, you're going to see him playing here, and we'll get a good look at him at that time.
Lastly, Jim, Blake and I have both worked and covered hockey in Toronto. I mean, it was always known that when Rutherford comes to town, whether it's Hartford, Carolina, Pittsburgh, he's probably going to stop and chit-chat with everyone there. We've seen you work a draft floor. Heck, I've seen you talk with fans in lobbies of the draft and whatnot. You seem to have great joy for doing the job. I wanted to ask you, just how much do you love what you do?
Well, I love it a lot. I mean, I think what I've done here shows how much I love the game, because actually when I stepped aside in Carolina, I was going to retire. I was ready to retire then, and I said I got the call from Pittsburgh, and I said, well, I'll go for a couple of years. I think we'll have a chance to win a cup there in a couple of years. And I was there for almost 7 years, and then I was really really felt I was retired. And then Francesco came to my house and sat with me for an afternoon, and I thought, I think I'm going to take on this challenge, and so if I didn't love the game, I wouldn't be here. But you're right, it's not just the game itself. I love the people in the game. I love the fans. I love the media. I like talking hockey, and that's been my life, and I just enjoy it.
Just can't quit managing in this league. Jim, marvelous discussion.